Wound my clock again. All right, shall we go ahead and get started? Frank will probably jump in as he jumps from one task to the next. He should be here shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Manzanita Planning Commission to order. This is a postponed meeting. We weren't meant to meet last week, but things got out of hand and we're meeting this week so that we could make sure that all the documents that we need were up to date. First order of business is audience participation. If there's anyone from the audience that wishes to talk about something that's not on the agenda, please raise your hand.
Karen, I do not have any hands raised.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from June 9th, but I don't remember getting them. I didn't see them posted on the website. Did anyone else receive them and I just missed them? Okay, so we'll postpone that approval to next month. So we're moving right ahead here. Layla, you're up next with any updates that you have for us.
Only update I would offer is that the City Council is still going through the review process of the housing ordinance amendments. They have another work session tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then we are anticipating a kind of public, let's say open house, but just a Q&A session with the City Council August 5th at New City Hall. I imagine we'll have another work session in August and then we'll see where we're at. So it's moving through very thoroughly and they're doing a great job asking lots of thoughtful questions. So happy to hear that. And then also just as an announcement, you'll get an email from me too, but we have our grand opening of City Hall on August 2nd at 11 a.m. and we'd love to see all of you there.
Is the council having an open house Q&A this Friday?
No, pardon me. It would be August 5th. So it's Tuesday.
August 5th. Okay.
Tuesday, August 5th.
Thanks. I had the wrong date on my calendar. Okay. Our new business then is to go back to the land division discussion. Oh, hi, Frank. Glad you're here on. So we looked at this, I want to say last year. It's been a very long time. The 95-5 is the ordinance that regulates land division within the city. And this is quite different from what we've had before. We did look at this, go all the way through it. As I understand it, there were some corrections or additions that needed to be made based on the, I want to say, DLCD review. So Marcy, do you want to walk us through that, or Layla, who are we talking to today about what's new?
I think I'm the one that's walking you through this presentation. Okay. I would consider this to be our work session number 1 about the land division. So think of it that way. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we can talk about an overview. I think you need to turn sharing on. Who does that?
You should be good now,
okay,
hopefully.
Thanks. Yeah, here we go. All right, can everybody see this presentation? And you hopefully have your own version of this. This is basically an overview, bunch of slides, and then we get into the actual 95.5 is attached here, and these are bookmarked in your own version if you want to go to the bookmark. And then the current text for your information is also attached.
And I'm actually, sorry to interrupt, Marcy. I'm just about to forward that. I have been in a meeting since you sent that, so I apologize I didn't get it out sooner. But Planning Commission, you should get this in just a moment.
All right. So, the first question, I guess, is why are we looking at...
Is that different than what you sent a couple of weeks ago? Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? So this new land division ordinance that we have, that we're working on today, will replace the current subdivision ordinance. It's 95.5. And the reason that we're doing it is because in earlier Planning Commission sessions, like really last year and forward, we discussed the desire for smaller lots and a wide variety of lot configurations and shared tracts, say for shared driveways, and also shared tracts for things that will allow like townhouses to exist and follow the rules that have been created in 95.4. But we also talked about zero lot lines and other types of configurations that if a developer wanted to use those, they would be available in the new land division code. They would be defined and they would have standards. And then we also we need to allow expedited middle housing land division, which is a procedure passed by the state. It's a procedure and standards passed by the state. It's called Senate Bill 458, and it has associated state rules. And we need to do this. It allows middle housing to be approved at land division to be approved at the same time that a building permit is obtained. And it's extremely detailed. Senate Bill 458 and its associated state rules, you can see them on the website. They're quite clear and objective. There's not a lot of wiggle room or choice. It's really not quite like 95, like we have been able to use a lot of choices and options when we went through the zoning ordinance, but a land division per the state is not as flexible. So I've been working with Walt Wendolowski on this from the beginning. He drafted this first version in last year, and then he updated it. We updated it per the land use attorney's review and also DLCT. And that's the version that you're seeing in front of you, but I would still consider it a draft. And that is largely because a lot of the things that it references are in 95.4, having to do with lot size, minimum density, and housing types and where they go. So that will change depending on the outcome of the council discussion. And so elements of the land division will change accordingly. But just to give you an orientation to what it consists of, is Walt took the subdivision ordinance and he organized it in a much more logical, kind of more modern way where general information like definitions are in the front, design standards so for flag lots are defined in design standards, and then street standards has some components pulled in from the updated TSP. I will caveat this and say that I don't believe all of them are here yet, though, so we'll be wrapping that in. And then he has specific chapters having to do with property boundary adjustments, partitions, subdivisions, and administration. And by the way, planned unit developments are still included in here just as they were before, but they're in a reorganized location. And then Article 8 is really where I want to focus us today on the expedited and middle housing land divisions. So just quick summary of what it allows. A middle housing land division may be submitted when the parent site is developed with middle housing, has an active building permit to construct middle housing, or the application for a land division must be reviewed concurrently with a building permit application for construction of middle housing. So as I said before, planned unit development and subdivisions are also regulated in the preceding chapters of 95.5. So what I would like to do is since this is our first serious work session on this ordinance, is talk about Article 8, kind of make sure that people understand how that works. So we'll literally be going through the pages of that section. Take your questions for the final round of coordination and resolution. As I said, we have some issues between 95.4 that are unresolved that will affect 95.5. And those especially are any standards referring to minimum lot size or other issues that are being decided by council. Discussed by council. Are there any questions about this? Bert?
Yeah, I had some questions. As I look at Article 8 and look at Article 2, there appear to be potential conflicts with the underlying components of Article 2 that may need to be adjusted to allow for the middle housing to be either allowed or more effective. And I think that should be reviewed. And so at the appropriate time, I could identify a few things for the commission to discuss as appropriate.
Let's take any other questions that there are right now, but I think that would be appropriate for you to do that right away after other general questions are asked. Anyone else? Questions about what we're doing or about Senate Bill 458 or middle housing expedited land division? Okay, I don't see anything. So do you want to steer me to the section of 2 that you want to talk about, Bert?
Yeah, I'll just throw out some observations on Article 2, lots and parcels. It appears that none of that whole first part of this has been modified. And,
exactly.
Right. And it speaks to lots and parcels having minimum for design standards, for instance, access, a 20-foot minimum drive or easement. And I think those are things that I believe we discussed that might want to have some potential modification as it relates to the discussions with middle housing. And then there's also flag lots that are identified. And, that probably also should be just reviewed as it relates to middle housing. A 25-foot access easement on a 50-foot lot, for instance, doesn't really quite work. And then Article 3, street standards, it has some similar things about private access easements. And I think that you had suggested some adjustments to that, I believe, in the middle housing. And for instance, it requires that easements serving more than 2 lots or parcels should comply with provisions of a private street, which means 20-foot to easement, 16-foot drive. And I think that's going to make the middle housing more challenging to achieve on a smaller lot, especially if if the council decides to have the 1,250 square foot lots. It's going to be all gobbled up by easements and roads. And in that section also, it talks about, it says a private access easement, which is the sole access, shall include a turnaround when the easement exceeds 150 feet, which seems reasonable and should be that for fire access, I suspect.
Where is this? Where can you point me to the?
Yeah, this is Article 3, street standards, section B4.
Okay.
Okay, or serves more than 1 lot or parcel. So if the team goes ahead with smaller parcels, then that would kind of really make things very challenging for the middle housing, I think. So,
Yes. Right.
So maybe it's just or serves, that whole section should be struck. And in that same kind of general section, uh, the easement in section C, the easement containing the private street or access easement should be excluded from the lot or parcel size calculation. And so, it's a compounding effect. If the easement, let's say you have 3 townhouses or 4 townhouses with an easement for access or something like that, and you take out all that easement area, then you're going to end up not really being able to achieve, I think, the goals of middle housing. And that's just, it's probably normal because that's a section that all this stuff was done in, 20, 30 years ago. And so it just does need to have a lens through it. On the application, and this probably really isn't tied to middle housing, but it could be. On the application review process, submittal requirements D, it says a vicinity sketch showing the location of the proposed land division. And I know that when we have discussed projects, there were a lot of neighbors that were concerned about the project that was going to get built next to them. And for instance, I think it was Heron's Nest. Is that the one that's the affordable housing project? And our current requirements don't really give the site in context very well. And I'm going to suggest that perhaps the vicinity sketch include the parcels and proposed streets, existing and proposed streets and trails within 250 feet of the plat boundaries or something like that. And it may not be appropriate for the middle housing, but it's just something for the team to consider. Are we giving the citizens enough information to review what's going to be proposed? So I have a big long list. The block length and access spacing, that still is the old 90s chart as opposed to what was recommended in 2023 by the commission about block sizes and all that stuff.
In the TSP?
Yes, right. It's the team should have the minutes of that meeting and what that is. And that's all that article first stuff. So the bottom line is that as the team reviews the middle housing ordinance, there probably wants to be a lens to review that we don't have conflicting ordinances. And the older ordinance needs some updates to make sure it's aligned with the goals of the community for middle housing.
Mm-hmm. Right. So good point. And some of these rules will change as we gain more clarity on exactly where we're headed on 95.4. So is it okay if I jump back to some of I want to point out before we dig into exactly why or the elements of the expedited land division Article 8, I want to talk about the goal. The end goal. It's a little easier to read this all with the end goal in mind. So as we have been discussing, there are a lot of benefits to the small lots. Middle housing works best with small lots. And a lot of those benefits and safeguards are built into 95.4 today, but they're under discussion, and I'm not sure where we're going to wind up at the end. But for townhouses, we do have to allow a minimum lot size of some size, less than the 5,000 square foot lot that currently exists. Now, what it will be, what the state requires, it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 or the 1,250. Then, so we will be allowing middle housing land division, at least for townhouses. And then cottage clusters also really benefit from middle housing land division too, so that we could ultimately have cottages sitting on their own lots, even if they're in a cottage courtyard configuration. So, for example, in this instance, we have a 5,000 square foot lot that would be divided into two, like through this line right here, for
Marcy,
town-
I'm not seeing anything. Maybe I have the wrong screen or something.
Would people use my screen?
No, I see it.
I see it fine.
I'll fix my deal. So,
Okay, so there's a 5,000 square foot lot that could be under the middle housing expedited land division divided into two along, say, that line there. And then the backyard would actually be a third tract. And that in this configuration on a 5,000 square foot lot, the driveway, the shared use driveway and the shared use tract for the parking area has to be in the back. That's the way that the rules work in 95-4. So it would be another tract in the middle housing land division would allow that to occur. So, and kind of a similar configuration for a townhouse on a, say, 10,000 square foot lot with assuming it may be two 5,000 lots aggregated together, they'd be able to take advantage of the shared driveway provision that we have written into 95-4. It's narrower than the one that, as you pointed out, Bert, is in the partition subdivision section of the land division. We're allowing it to be, I think, 15 feet. But again, the shared parking area would have to be at the back. So a subdivision here would look like 4 townhouse lots and a shared driveway parking area tract. And similarly, if you had a corner lot or an end of the block facing the narrow side of the block, you could potentially subdivide that lot, depending on the minimum lot size that we wind up with at the end, into 1,250 square foot lots. And each of those townhouses could have their own frontage. It would only work if you had the parking, taking advantage of the parking pocket provisions that we wrote into 95-4. But these are just some examples of the way that the middle housing land division would work on townhouses. And the building envelope that we've created would still apply to all of those types. And the cottage cluster is also another middle housing type that would really benefit from the expedited land division, although there aren't any, it's really not subject to a maximum density. So you just have to meet the standards for the minimum footprint or the average footprint and the shared open space. You meet all those standards, that's your cottage cluster. But in the event of a land division, you would have a shared tract that included the shared area. And if there was a shared parking area, wherever that might be, that would be the same shared tract as the common area or a separate one. And then each cottage would have its own lot. So let's see what else we have here. I have for you. I wanted to point out something that I think we didn't get to talk about enough, but the shared tracts that townhouses will need in order to function is really important part of the 95-4, part of the safeguards against townhouses. The way that 4.160 special design standards work in 95-4 is we have a special section that's design standards just related to townhouses and their configurations. And townhouses are limited to 2 attached in MH1 and only 4 attached in MH2 and 3. But that limits you. There's also a limitation as to how the driveways work. And so if you've read 4.160, a quick little summary of what it says is, your first option is to provide shared access at the rear, like this, like number 1. The second option is to provide, if you do not have that kind of access, like you can see this is on the corner of a block, if you don't have access to provide, say, a short alley at the back, then you will have to provide access from the street through a shared driveway. And if you have none of those available to you, then you'll have to provide, and you have to provide shared driveways on the front. You still have to provide a 24-foot minimum spacing between the driveway aprons. And that's to allow landscaping and parking, on-street parking, to the extent that you have those things on the street. Are there any questions about this? So for all the housing types, really the shared tract is kind of most crucial for townhouses. And I guess the last point I want to make about lots and lot sizes is, talking about Heron's Rest and the size of the lot sizes that we have there and how important subdivision has been for that development in order to provide fee simple cottage lots. This is also a goal of the expedited middle housing land division, so that the goal of it ultimately is that if you meet the standards that are in Article 8 and the other standards that are in the land division and all the other standards that are related to cottages and cottage clusters, you would not have to go through the planned unit development process. You could use the expedited middle housing land division and have your approval at the same time that you got your building permit. Are there any questions about that? Okay, so now I'm going to jump down to the, again, this is the bookmarked section. This is the 95.5 land division as Walt drew it up. General information is in the top. Design standards for things like flag lots and lots, and as has been pointed out by Bert, it and street standards still reflect some of the older assumptions about lot sizes and streets, and these will need to be updated when we have that resolved. But the procedures for property boundary adjustments, partitions, and subdivisions kind of are the same. They got carried over from 95.4, and they planned unit development, I think, is included in Article 6. Administration, there are some new elements here to make it clear and objective, and also clear that the decision making for expedited and middle housing land division is actually the designee and not the Planning Commission. So I'd like to jump down to Article 8. And you'll find that on page 51 of the packet, if you want to go there with me. And I was hoping we can walk through this piece by piece. It's not that long. This section itself is only about 5 pages. All right, so as I mentioned, Senate Bill 458 was drafted 5 years ago. It's similar to House Bill 2001. It set up a process for middle housing land divisions, and it's extremely specific, but it is a little confusing. It will, when you read it, it seems a little circular. Like, one of the provisions is you have a middle housing development, say a cottage cluster, and you divide it into separate lots, but these do not become homes on their own lots. They're still considered a cottage cluster. And that's just something that the middle housing provisions had to create language for, concept for, because of the, I think the risk would be that if somebody might think that if they subdivided their cottage cluster and it became a parent lot, that you could then subdivide it again, and you would just have this endless repeating increase, and that's not acceptable, obviously. So the way that we go through this is an expedited land division has to comply, is only on land zoned for residential uses. It's only for the purpose of residential use, including recreational or open space uses, accessory to those. It does not provide for dwellings or accessory buildings to be located on land that's specifically mapped or designated comprehensive plan. So basically, it's just residential land. It has to satisfy the minimum street or other right-of-way connectivity standards established by Article 3. So as those are updated, this will be updated. As we come to an agreement about what the minimum lot size is, that's kind of a key. But this, I want to point out this provision right here, because this is not required. Number 5 is not required by the state. It's something that Walt proposed here, and I'd like to discuss it because I think there is a choice here. You can adopt land division for middle housing with this provision or not. Do we want to limit middle housing expedited land division to development that creates lots or parcels to allow building residential units at 80% or more of the maximum net density, and that either, or all the dwellings will be sold or rented to households with incomes below 120% of the median family income for Tillamook County. Personally, I think that this is unnecessary. I think all middle housing should be eligible for expedited middle housing land division. But can we have a discussion about this?
I'm not sure I understand. Could you add a little bit more detail? I'm not sure I understand what.
If you had housing that was not meeting the affordability threshold, it wasn't meeting the density objective here, then you would have to go through the non-expedited land division procedures that are detailed in the other parts of the land division code.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yes. Clear to me. Thank you. I'm just going to open it up to speak freely rather than call on people. I'll make sure everybody gets to speak. Somebody want to jump in?
Well, I'll jump in. So you're proposing an 80% of the maximum density as a threshold for getting expedited middle housing permitting, or?
That's the proposal that Walt put in here.
Okay.
And if I could clarify, I'm glad you brought this particular point up, John. If I could clarify the one point on density, that threshold for density will have to be calibrated to the threshold to the density that we wind up with when we have an actual minimum lot size decision.
And basically anybody that doesn't meet that just goes through the regular process. It's still middle housing, but it's not whatever we're going to call it.
It's not an expedited process. You're not going to get your approval for the land division at the same time that you get your building permit.
Right. But it doesn't have anything to do with costs or housing costs or, low income rent or anything like that. It's just density.
No, sorry, there's another provision. Let me just bring that up again. There were two. So condition B is that all dwellings will be sold or rented to households with incomes below 120% of the median family income for Tillamook County. So that's
you've got to satisfy both requirements?
Will result in development that either
or.
Either or, okay.
Did Walt explain what he was trying to accomplish here?
He was using a lot of precedents that other cities and counties have used in Oregon.
To just streamline if this criteria is in place.
This criteria came from a couple of other cities and counties that he was using as a precedent, but not all the cities and counties that have adopted Senate Bill 458 use this. It's not required by the legislation. It's an extra hurdle, in other words. Bert, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out. It's really saying that if you're going to do middle housing, then we're going to give you the green light to get through the process quickly. And so this trigger of 80% or more, for instance, if you were to, depending on what the council decides on lot sizes, the percentage, 80%, for instance, if you had 1,250 square foot lots on a 5,000 square foot parcel, this provision would say you need to do 4 townhouses, for instance, on that parcel in order to go get the green light and the fast permitting. If you did 3 townhouses, you would not qualify for the expedited process. Is that kind of what it says?
It's kind of what it says, yes.
Yeah, as an example, if the decision is 1,500 square foot or whatever the number is, then let's say you would have 3. Somehow the math just it's just encouraging the ones that are going to do more units are going to get the green light. Doesn't really say the number of units though, right? So when they say maximum net density, I want to make sure that it's just not, if you build one unit or 2 units on a lot, you're not getting green lighted, right? So I think the language just needs to make sure if the team wants this in there, that it's really doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Our goal is to encourage more units. Is that correct? The goal of this provision? Marcy, do you know the
it's either
answer?
It's either to encourage more units, although I'm not sure it does that completely, based on some of the examples that Bert just walked us through. And I have a hard time picturing how this would work because we haven't yet settled on an actual minimum lot size. So, but this would actually require you to provide some assurance of affordability to, middle income housing. Personally, like I said, I don't think that I think these are 2 hurdles that we could forego. I think if it's middle housing, I personally think there are better ways to describe our goals here. And one proposal would be to describe that it has to have the development that's eligible for expedited middle housing land division would have to consist of a majority of middle housing types as defined by 95-4. So it could be a lot that includes an existing home and has been subdivided or will be subdivided to allow some cottages on it. But if the majority of homes, new dwellings on it are defined in 95-4 as types of middle housing, then it would be eligible for expedited. And I would propose that we consider something like that instead of putting a affordability or a density threshold on it.
Yeah, and then A, it doesn't seem to matter what the lot size ends up being, because if it's 80% is 80% regardless. And then B, mandating that everything in that falls under that same sort of guideline might be excessive. Because So I agree with Marcy that I don't see the point of either one of those.
I see one point of item B with the deed restriction means that those homes or dwellings would forever be available only to people who meet the threshold, whatever the Tillamook County threshold happens to be.
But don't we already have that standard when we approve middle housing being built, just like what we're doing currently? I mean, those are deed restricted, isn't that? I thought that was automatic. That if you're going to build middle housing based around these parameters, that they're always going to be middle housing.
I don't believe that's written anywhere. That one of the reasons that we were able to kind of push the apartment project through was because they were going to deed restrict it to and have it managed by an organization that will follow the rules for the median housing. But to me, that I understand why this would be important, especially if it's fee simple. If the dwellings are sold as fee simple, that they would always be available to whatever that threshold is, so that we always have a supply of housing that is truly middle housing. So I understand why that's there. I kind of like it, but I'm not sure that that's the best way to ensure that we always have. You know what's going to happen if people are going to build little townhouses and then sell them, and then they get sold to the next people at 150% of whatever they paid for it, and it'll go up and up and up, and we'll never have a steady supply of affordable housing. So I think that's why what the intent of that is. Whether it's the best way to do it, I'm not sure.
I will add that this requires deed restrictions to be managed, which is not something that the city currently does. And I think that should be taken into consideration. John?
Well, it seems to me that, we're talking apples and oranges here. There's two different issues. Middle housing by itself is not necessarily a low-income enterprise. We want more units, and we're hoping that it makes the overall cost of owning a house maybe would be a little less onerous on people, but low-income housing is a different thing, which, like we're doing over in the Pines development, it is middle housing, but it is more than that. So I'll ask the question again: what our goal here is? What is it to help people doing low-income housing, which I think we kind of already do. I think Frank may have mentioned that I don't know if we already do, but we certainly did when it comes to the project over on the east side of Highlands.
But that's all rental property. None of that is going to be available for people to start building ownership.
But that's what this B says. It's all about rental householdds.
The AMI for a household of one. The AMI for a household of one is 70,000 right now. I don't even know how somebody making 70 would even work in 5B. At the end of the day, this is just expediting for somebody to get their permit. No?
Or permit for multiple units in a middle housing context.
And it doesn't say how many units that has to be. It could be one.
No, it doesn't. And I think units is more important than density in this case.
I kind of, Brad made a point there that it isn't our middle housing ordinance say a duplex is middle housing?
Yes.
Duplex, it could be
It does.
townhouse. I mean, duplex.
Right, so-
It doesn't. This doesn't address, unless Marcy, you read it differently.
So I think,
Well, I do. And actually, this is something that will need to be updated with the final list of housing types that we're going to include. But middle housing is by definition 2 or more dwelling units.
I think this is the expedited permit is probably a question for staff. Are they able to actually manage expedited permits? But I think the purpose of the middle housing, if you look kind of globally, is to get more housing built. And so it would say, without these provisions, essentially, that anybody who's doing a duplex on up would have an expedited permit in the city. And, that's probably a good thing, but then I don't know if the city can actually handle that kind of workload.
But how is that a good thing if it's only limited to, like I said, I think the current AMI for Tillamook County right now for a household of one anyway, 70,000.
I think what Bert is saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is that middle housing by itself, a duplex or greater, say 2 or more of the form of middle housing, is by itself a benefit. And adding these provisions to the requiring middle housing to meet those 2 provisions in order to be eligible for expedited land division is not necessary. Am I hearing you correctly, Bert?
I think so. I think the discussion for the commission might be, well, is duplex on up a reasonable number? Or should it be 3 units on up that gets into the expedited pathway? And I guess my sense, it probably is a city staff question, but I don't know what percentage of units in the city currently are duplex or the permits are for duplex. I'd say it's probably not very high. And so I think most of the parcels are probably getting developed as single family parcels. So it seems like in order to just have more housing, it probably makes sense to have it a duplex on up. But that's just kind of for conversation.
Well, I mostly agree with what Bert just said, but if we have a duplex on a large lot, something bigger than 5,000 square feet, that doesn't really help us any. If our goal is more units, I guess density does have plays a part in this. And I think our discussion is we're probably getting out over our skis a little bit because we don't know where we're going to end up on lot size. And I think that needs to be woven into this discussion somehow.
Okay, I'm going to take this as work session discussion for this one piece, and then we can discuss the next bit.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to come back to this after we've had some time to really think about it and understand what we're asking of people.
Okay. So section B, again, the first part says a middle housing land divisions, and it defines middle housing land division as applying to duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, or cottage developments. Now, there's obviously something missing from this list: townhouses, also the want to do housing types that we've defined, they're missing from this too. So just a flag for now that this provision will have to be updated when it is decided what the final housing types will be. But it could apply to duplexes and above. And I believe that is the intention of expedited land division.
Marcy, is the expedited land division a requirement of the state law? And are the commission's purview is to try to define what gets that expedited permit?
Yes. I wish I could tell you the answer to that question. I've submitted a query to make sure that I'm correct, but I think that I've submitted a query to HAPO and DLCD, but I believe that to comply with SB 406, like all Tillamook County cities and the county has to do, they also need to adopt expedited land division for middle housing. I believe that that's true. So I think that we're going to have to do this one way or another. All right, so moving on, this defines that a middle housing land division may be submitted when the parent site is developed with middle housing, has an active building permit to construct middle housing, or the application for a land division must be reviewed concurrently with building permit application. It's the clause that I read earlier. And the land use decision is described in the section. Again, this is part of this like circular language that gets a little confusing about these rules, but is not a land use decision or a limited land use decision under ORS 197.015 and House Bill 2138, which is the imminent update to House Bill 2001, which will go into effect in 2028, actually puts a little extra language on this that these are not subject to appeals. So it's a special kind of land use decision that's defined in 197.015. So in order to, any questions about that or any?
Well, that is very confusing because how can it be an expedited land division but not be a land use decision? That's confusing to me. So it says there an expedited land division and middle housing land division, as described, is not a land use decision. So it's a division, but not a decision.
Yeah, let me read you the exact language from the 2138 because they attempted to clarify this.
Okay, because you're right. It's very circular.
It maybe
It is, but it isn't.
It's as of right is I think maybe what it's trying to get
It's
at.
what's missing or something.
Yes.
I'm like, it's got to have something else there. Because when does it become a decision?
Yeah, I think they're trying to say, the state's trying to say, it's an as of right provision that you don't have to go in front of anybody to get a decision if it's yes or no. It's as of right.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Bert. Those are things beyond my comprehension.
I can't find the exact added language, but that's essentially the effect.
Okay.
It's by right.
It's my extensive legal training, Frank.
You've been around the block a few times, right? But in land use decisions, Bert. All right, so moving on to the process. Let's see if I can get the process all in.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Back on back in the very front, it talked about applicable to residential. It's right at the very beginning. And since we have residential allowed in our C1 zone, I'm not sure where that was, but
it's right up at the top, you said? Or is it in the beginning
right there.
of this?
It says includes only land zoned for residential uses.
A1.
Yes, right. A1. And our C1 zone allows residential. In fact, currently unless it's getting changed with this ordinance, you can have a single family house on Laneda. And so I guess the question for interpretation is, does this include the C1 zones?
No, it does not. And there's another section, I can't quite remember where it is in here, that specifically says this only applies to MH1 and 2 and 3.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to just keep that on the back burner for when we talk about updates to the commercial zone as we go through the commercial comprehensive plan sections, because that might be a point we want to look at later as far as single family homes.
You want to keep the commercial zone and the provisions for middle housing and expedited middle housing land division on the discussion for those zones, for that zone.
Mainly to keep the single family home discussion.
Okay.
For those zones.
Okay.
Not so much the middle housing.
Right. So let's review the process together. So this is really by the book, according to Senate Bill 458. They're very, very specific about laying out the procedures, the timeline for this process. And that is also what makes it a by right and not a land use decision. So we can just read this quietly together, and then we'll check in a moment about questions. Any questions about this so far?
Yeah. Marcy, is this is the state process? Is that basically it?
That's basically it. And none of this can change.
Right. Got it.
How's the staff feel about expediting all of that?
We like it.
Oh, okay. Just
Yeah, we do.
Everything's kind of, shortened.
Yeah, well, it becomes administrative, so it's, if the requirements are clear and objective and easy to follow, it just makes it a lot simpler for us, and it makes it quicker. And just in turn, I know our job here isn't to talk about how the market responds to these things, but reducing time to entitlement is an important factor in reducing the soft costs associated with development. So the more we can simplify and do these things in a expedited way, the better off it is in terms of how that adds up with other factors in place that help reduce the cost of constructing housing.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move on to discuss submittal requirements next. So I'll just let people read this also. Any questions about this? And we will move on to review 040 in just a moment. In fact, it's right here.
Marcy, just like on the submittal requirements, and this is really kind of a staff question, showing the setbacks on the plan and that it complies with the zoning, does that make it better for the staff to review it.
Are you referring to a specific part?
Yeah, for instance, that a site plan that demonstrates that all the buildings and structures on a resulting lot or parcel comply with the applicable building code relating to the proposed property lines. This is all building code, but should there be, also complies with all zoning ordinance and building code, for instance. Just put that in the front. And then at number 3, it shows the easements and utility connections, but doesn't show compliant or what the setbacks are. Maybe that's not needed and that can be figured out later, but I just want to make it easy for the staff to review this stuff.
Yeah, I was just searching through further to see because there is a under criteria of approval, there's a little bit more detail about easements and their required connectivity for utilities, for example, but there's no more about the site plan.
Marcy, this isn't anymore. There's no more information required in this process than our normal process, is there?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. It's a question that I can research further. I think a question might be also that if this is, if you require more of a subdivision, or for example, under your current process, we may not be able to do that for middle housing.
We may not be able to require more for middle housing than we do for a current subdivision.
I'm saying if this is what is allowed to be required of middle housing in order for it to be a by right process, and you currently require more of a subdivision process that's not eligible for middle expedited land division, we may not be able to add to this.
Okay. I think you're right, John. This looks like, without comparing line by line, the same list of stuff that we would require on any subdivision. The main difference seems to me is that it takes it off of the Planning Commission's docket and speeds it through as a staff review only. But it looks like the same list to me.
There's probably more that we have required than is on this list, but I would think we would still want all that on the plan as to be reviewed. I don't know, and Marcy made a good point. They may not allow. I think there's a chance that we require more than what's on this, section B here. And I guess the question, maybe Marcy, you can research this, find out from the state if we can do that. I mean, we have other things that we require that aren't on this list.
So I will research that. It would be to compare this list with your current requirements for subdivision, and if there are differences, if your current process requires more.
Yeah, and Marcy, in the next, because under the criteria of approval, it says based on whether it satisfies the applicable criteria of approval. So that's what we're looking at. What is that applicable criteria of approval? Everything that we just saw, or the things that we haven't seen that they're asking about right now being included?
I guess what Frank's asking is, do we get to define
what that criteria
is, or is the state going to define it for us?
Right. Thank you, John.
Well, let's review the a criteria of approval. That's part of the legislation that's
Okay.
been translated into this land division code. So any comments about this part? I think this is by the book. It's pretty clear. There's this one last section. I'm just going to try to capture that in the screen here. And this is the one that the clarification, it's really more of a clarification than a requirement. But it just says that the type of middle housing developed on the original lot shall not be altered by the middle housing land division. This is part of that circular language that I was describing. Cottage cluster units within a cottage cluster do not become single-family detached residential units after a middle housing land division. They still stay a cottage cluster. And that is to avoid getting into this endless cycle of more and more land division. So I see people thinking, I mean, do you feel that you know what's in here, and do you want, do you have any further questions that you want me to research regarding beyond the ones that we just discussed about, so let's take this one at a time. Are people uncomfortable with this? Do you want me to research how it compares with your current requirements? And are you uncomfortable enough that you would like me to inquire as to or find out what the procedure for altering, if there is any, or adding additional requirements to this? 3 separate questions.
I guess for me, it would be, is there elements of the base section that should be improved that would then correspondingly be improved here? And, but it doesn't seem like we have much flexibility to change this without going back to the former section.
When you say the base section, do you mean another article, an earlier article in this 95.5? Or are you talking about the zoning, the 95.4, the whole other?
Yeah, well, the 95.4, we do know that there's some conflicts there with this, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe the question is that, for instance, this speaks to, maybe here's the question. We have our middle housing provision, but if someone's doing a subdivision that, ultimately may not be classified as middle housing, that's a single family subdivision, as an example. It's not going through the expedited process, but are there elements of, when I say base, that's kind of what I mean,
How do you define a middle housing application that would be eligible for this land division procedure? Is that what you're describing?
Yes, I believe that's what I'm describing. And then I just want to, if someone's just going to do a single family subdivision, is their procedure any different than this?
Well, yes, it would be not expedited.
It would be not expedited, but are there?
But there's no such thing as single family housing anymore, right?
Yeah, basically.
So kind of everything is eligible for expediting, or
you can still develop a single dwelling.
Right, I know that, but it's not.
Well, you could do
It's
a,
still by right. I don't know.
if you did well, let's say you had, 50 single family housing subdivision, right? That was targeted as single family, even though the zoning allows, up to 4 units on a lot. The only way that they would get expedited is if they submitted something that had at least duplexes or more as part of the subdivision.
So if it's a subdivision with whatever with 5,000 square foot lots, for instance, and somebody wanted to, one of the owners of a 5,000 square foot lot wanted to build a duplex, they can do that by right. And it sounds like we could expedite that, even though globally it's a bigger subdivision.
I think a way to
subdivision
describe,
within a subdivision, and I sort of sounds like that's what we're trying to avoid.
I think what you might be describing, John, would be, say somebody comes in with a 5-lot development of duplexes. They have 5 duplexes. They could go through this expedited land division process and subdivide those lots at the same time that they got their approval for the middle housing.
Well,
They could subdivide the land also into, so they would wind up with 8 lots, 8 dwellings on separate lots.
Well,
hopefully my brain won't explode right here on the screen. But it seems to me like we're in the process of approving a subdivision for the Highlands. When that's done, we will have a series of lots up there that were originally proposed as single families, but under the new ordinance will be multi-housing or middle housing. And if somebody wanted to take one of those lots and put a duplex on it and subdivide it so that there's fee simple on both units, that would be expedited, correct?
Yes, as long as they met this criteria, that each one
Okay.
had its own utility connection. It had met all the tract and street requirements, frontage requirements.
Okay. So
I
I think I
guess-
understand the goal here. So
yeah, I think that's right, John. I'm just trying to understand if, let's say, a Highlands-like project that had 50 lots, it would allow for, let's say 3 or 4 units, depending on what ends up here, on each lot, 5,000 square foot lot. But if they didn't, if they didn't come in with a proposal that would show they had lots that were compliant with the duplex on up requirement, they wouldn't be able to get the expedited permit. I think.
right, if they came in with a single family plan, no expedited service.
Yeah, but the subdivision itself, if it showed just 5,000 square foot lots, without any condition or otherwise that there be middle housing, as part of that, then what prevents them from getting an expedited permit, I guess is the question. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think that's-
I understand what
that's
they're saying. It's how do we define what a duplex lot is if it's 5,000 square feet? Do they say we're going to build 2 units on there? In this case, then it should be 2,500 square foot lots. I don't know.
These are
Yeah,
all really good questions, but I actually think that one of the points of the expedited middle housing land division is you're talking about a subdivision that's dividing a piece of land into lots. There's
Right.
no planned, they're not coming in for a building permit yet.
Right.
We're talking, this is all designed around the idea that someone is coming in for a building permit and they're getting their subdivision approval at the same time.
well, is that really true, Marcy? I mean, couldn't someone just go ahead and do the subdivision without their building permit? that was a middle housing.
That's a really good question, Bert. I mean, I don't know if that would be eligible for the expedited process because it doesn't have a building plan for it. It's not coming in with a building permit. I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I will research it. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of this section. So let's just go through the last few provisions together: conditions of approval and final plat and appeals. So does this offer any more clarity or provide or create more questions?
I think that actually helps in my case, a little more clear.
Can you help me understand how you see that?
Well, the piece about notation that it's reviewed under the state code, not able for further subdivision, with the notations on the plan, a condition that requires recording of easements and such, it basically creates a little mini subdivision and with the big red stamp that's saying, okay, this is all you get. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of answered the question I had about the circular logic piece that we talked about earlier.
Agree.
Marcy, on final plat B3, it says the dwelling developed on the middle housing lot is a unit of middle housing. It is not a single family detached residential unit or any other housing type. I don't understand how that relates to cottage housing, and you would have to have a very clear definition of cottage housing as different from a single family detached residential unit, I think.
That's a good point.
But cottage housing, or the cottage cluster as a housing type, and by extension the courtyard apartment, those have very specific standards associated with them. A footprint of 900 square feet, or maximum average of 1,400 square feet total. I mean, they have a lot, and a requirement to create a common area. Parking is shared. So there are a lot of requirements in 4.160 that make it a cottage cluster.
I think that still serves our purpose. I mean, Bert, it's defined as a middle housing type. It just says you can't go in and build single family housing in one of these subdivided pieces if we've given you that approval for middle housing.
Right. Okay, so I'll just put out a question. So let's say a 5,000 square foot lot creates 3 lots that are standalone buildings with their own parcel, and they're not a common wall or anything else. Is that saying that could not be done?
It might be that you'd have to call it a triplex and it would have to meet the requirements of a detached triplex.
Okay. Okay. Well, that sounds good.
Is there such thing as a detached?
Yeah, we have duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. We allow them to be attached or detached in any configuration.
Okay.
That's what we've discussed as our definition.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
So that works.
Okay, that's the end of section 8. And I'm going to stop sharing. I think you've all gotten immersed into the land division code.
And no heads exploded.
Hey, Marcy, can you come back just to one thing and clarify that last statement? So 3 non-connected homes you just termed a triplex? Or did I misunderstand?
No, if you have a 5,000 or other square foot lot, you could develop a triplex. I think actually never mind what I said about the lot size because we're still that's still kind of up in the air. But if you have 3 detached units, you would call that a triplex.
It's not a
Single family
triplex.
dwellings that are no longer having a shared wall,
Triplexes are not required to have a shared wall.
and they don't have a shared
Nor
wall.
are duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes are not required to have a shared wall, nor to be stacked.
Then what's the difference between? Okay, so
Yeah,
just
it's a cottage cluster at that point.
wow.
You could if they're small enough, but the cottage cluster has to.
Under 900.
I think it's a minimum of 4, and they have to have a shared common area.
Yeah, I think, Brad, I think the difference is that currently the duplex zoning, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of has to be one building rather than 2 separate buildings on a lot. I don't think you can kind of do that currently. Maybe. Karen.
No, right. I've heard from developers in Manzanita that said they currently their language is a little ambiguous, and so they've been required to have duplexes that are only attached.
Right. So I think the provision of being able to have smaller lots, if someone chooses with a detached triplex or duplex or whatever it is, it's probably a good thing.
The attachment, as I understand it, so far only has to be a shared roof line or a breezeway or some other form of connectivity between each building. We have a few of those that are already built that way in town.
Exactly.
They are connected by some physical structure.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's one next door to me, and
But-
what this does, it would allow, like for instance, 2 separate buildings on their own lot, as it wouldn't be a condominium, which of course it could be, but a little bit different.
But does that answer your question, Brad?
I probably need to do a little bit of homework on my own. So yes and no, thanks.
There's kind of an interesting little graduation of the logic and the numbers of units. Like, so a duplex is 2, a triplex is 3, quadplex is 4. Cities were allowed to require them to be attached or to allow them to be attached or detached. And I recommended to Manzanita early on the process, and it seemed like it went with the kind of ethic that we were proceeding with, that more flexibility is better. So we went with attached or detached, no requirement. Could be a combination. You could have a quadplex that's 2 attached and 2 detached.
I would think most people would prefer them not being attached because then you don't have to worry about the neighboring wall of noise that always comes along with a duplex, triplex, or whatever.
Well, if you have a large enough lot, yeah, or you don't have, or it may be if you're trying to save a tree or you have trying to, and there's not enough room on your site to provide all the parking, you might wind up having to attach them to each other. But anyway, this middle housing land division does allow you to subdivide it into 2. If you were to subdivide, say, let's just imagine that someone has a duplex that's attached and they come in and they want to run a property line between them. They would have to meet building code requirements for the townhouse, basically for a townhouse. What is a townhouse? Fire separated construction. Well, so I'm hearing that if this is our first work session on the land division, and I think y'all know what the system is basically about, and I have some things I have to research and come back to you with. And we're also waiting to hear where we land on lot size. So some of these things are subject to change and definitely refinement. Maybe we should talk, maybe I could pull Layla in to talk a little bit about our schedule for working through the details, resolving them, and then toward adoption.
Thanks. So I'm just pulling up my calendar. So our next work session would be August 11th. And then what we had stated at the hearing that you adopted or recommended adoption of the housing ordinance work is that we would have a public hearing on a date certain of September 8th. And so I think we're still tracking towards that date. My thinking is that we hold the meeting in August, and if we need to have another discussion between August 11th and September 8th, we can do that. The reason we need to have a hearing on the 8th is that we did a Measure 56 notice for this, and so we had to continue the hearing to a date certain. And that time, back in May, it seemed very far away, and now it's getting a little closer. So I'm curious if folks feel like that schedule still seems reasonable. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and if we need to consider having an additional meeting, perhaps August 18th would be my recommendation, as you do it right after. So that gives staff enough time to go through and make any changes if we need to. Anyone? I didn't hear a lot of controversy today, but I also don't want to minimize that folks need some time to think through some things as well. So,
Layla, where do you see council with where they are with this process?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that's a relevant point. So at this point, the way that council's tracking, my guess is that by their August 13th meeting, we'll have a very good indication of where they stand. They have another work session tomorrow. As I mentioned, they're having a community conversation August 5th. And then the next time they get together to discuss this in depth would be at the work session August 13th. And I think the key thing that would be relevant to this would be the minimum lot size, right? So
But they're meeting between now and say August 13th. Would our August 11th still be a little too early? Don't we need?
Yeah, it's a good question, Brad. I think that depends on whether or not there's outstanding issues that you all feel you need to discuss. If we feel, and we can, I guess we're in July, so we'll need to kind of make that call now. If we need to just wait till after the council has a discussion, and then we can postpone planning commission to the 18th, or you can have meetings on both days if needed.
I just feel the information.
What's your thought on getting information back from the state? You think you'll have it by our next meeting?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They're very fast.
want to make it easier.
I'm a little more concerned about, the timing of so August 5th is what again?
So that's when the city council is engaging with the community, just having an informal opportunity for folks to come.
And August 13th is when they're likely kind of pull all the work that they've been doing in the community and put into a decision, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think once they decide on things, then there's a scramble to tighten all of the parts of 95-4 up, and also the effect on land division code. So I mean, the 18th almost seems really soon after that happens, but if that's where we have to land, I can't imagine though that August 11th is going to be very productive because we're kind of waiting on so much around 95-4.
Yeah, I mean, and I just threw out the 11th. You could also do the 25th, which would give you us a little more time to decipher what.
Yeah, that might be best.
Yeah, so better. I think the 13th, my expectation is this could change, right? City council's prerogative to decide how much work they want to, further analysis they want to do on this. But they're doing really good work and digging in pretty hard now. So I feel pretty good about their ability to meet a September 3rd first reading was their hope, but that's what we're tracking towards if possible. But that too may have its own complexities in terms of being able to wrap everything up depending on what the changes are. So
would it make sense for us to meet at our normal August 11th meeting, even knowing that there will be some issues that won't have been resolved? We can go through the other things that the rest of the basic subdivision stuff, the partition stuff, the lot line adjustment stuff, make sure that we're clear on everything that's not up for question, so that we don't have the whole process to go through as we're getting crunched at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I think that would be the ideal approach, is for the planning commission to work through everything but the lot size number. That will be set when the city council makes their determination of how they want to set that in 95-4. So it would be best if we could just have that be the kind of only outstanding issue. And then.
Is that the only outstanding issue, though? Is there like setbacks?
That's not what I'm saying. No, I think with city council, as it relates to land division, yes. I think that's, and Marcy can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the only outstanding issue that would affect this ordinance. Is that right, Marcy?
Yes, I think so. But it has many different places where it shows up. It needs to be
correct.
Resolved inside the land division. There's probably like 10 different places where we're going to have to change something because of whatever they decide about lot size.
Yeah.
Are they having a big debate about that, or is it just?
It is one of the issues that they're still spending some time on discussing, Frank. Yeah.
I would encourage those that want to go to our website, because the videos, if you don't sit in live, the recordings are pretty informative, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can pick up sound bites or opinions or perspectives. And what we do with them is a different thing. But I think there was some interesting input and a cross section of input that's of value to hear.
Yeah, for sure. But I think as far as this ordinance goes, as much as, it would be great to get consensus and agreement on how to move this bit forward outside of the lot size issue, because that will be driven by council's decision. Because if you decide a smaller or different lot size in this version, my guess is it will have to go to, when it goes to council, they'll just fix it to match with whatever it is they decide.
Okay, any thoughts on an interim meeting, or do you want to just hold off? We don't have anything else on our schedule for next month, do we?
No, we don't. Not at this time. Well, Scott jumps in and tells me otherwise. So might I suggest that we just hold the meeting on the 11th and I've hashed through pretty much all of this except for the lot size. And then could we have folks just sort of tentatively hold the 25th?
Yeah.
No, that doesn't work.
I'm traveling then.
No problem. The next week is Labor Day, so.
Well, how many people are available on the 25th? As long as we have a quorum.
That's true.
Available. John's available. Lee, you traveling again? Lee's available. Karen?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Frank.
available also.
So who's traveling?
Brad.
Well,
Brad.
I am, and I think
Brad.
I realize we only need a quorum. I
Yeah.
think it's pretty critical, it sounds like, meeting, and I think a few of us we may have different views.
Mhm.
And I would hope that if we still have different views, they can be heard.
Well, you'll still have the 11th too. So hopefully a lot of the discussion can be, like I said, handled in that your regular meeting, and that really the 25th is
If we need it.
If you need it, if city council, because if you leave your meeting on the 11th, sort of reaching some level of consensus or agreement on how to proceed, it's really kind of a surgical fix to put in
Is the
minimum
18th an
lot
option?
size. I'm sorry?
Is the 18th an option?
I think that it could be. I think the only concern was that it's pretty close on the heels of the August 13th meeting.
And making all those cascading changes as a result of the city council work session on the 13th. Between that and the 18th isn't much time for Walt and me to make those changes.
Okay.
It's a weekend.
And for what it's worth, I'm traveling that week, but
The 25th or the 18th?
I'm out the 14th. I return the 25th.
Okay. Lucky you.
Survival is what it is.
Hey, can we come back to one? I've got one question as I assume we're wrapping up. The whole on 95.5 on the whole expediting thing. Can I ask a question there for clarity?
Of course.
Do we think the objective is to by expediting to kind of spur development, right? I sense.
Yeah,
Make it
it's to
simpler.
spur development. It's
Yeah.
to make the process faster.
Simpler. Okay, faster, same thing. But wouldn't also as an incentive, it's an incentivification, correct? To incentivize?
Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't another equal tool or even a better tool be, and I don't know how the city's going to look at this from a revenue standpoint, but what works well in other jurisdictions and cities and states is waiving of like SDCs and other permit costs.
That's part of the package, right? But the city, I would say at this point, is in no position to be able to waive system development charges. We don't have the resources that bigger cities certainly that I've worked in did, and the ability to backfill.
Like I said, it's probably not popular, but I just look at how do you incentivize.
Yeah. No, I
works in
understand very
larger
well.
cities.
That's a good tool for it. But as your city manager, I'm going to say not now.
How did I know that was going to be used?
How long did it take Heron's Rest to be approved under your current PUD process?
I mean, we're well over a year. Please.
Heron's Rest has been under discussion since the 2018, I want to say, something like, from
the point they submitted for their first PUD, it's been well over a year, I think.
Yeah.
Well, time is money, right?
Time is money.
You might be able to incentivize with a shorter timeline, even if you can't give SDC waivers right now.
Yeah, it seems like if you were doing SDC waivers, having that affordable provision, would be one of the triggers to help the affordable projects. It'd be great for middle housing projects, but maybe that some funds could be found for those affordable projects that were deed restricted.
Yeah, the county has a grant program. They can pay their SDCs on their behalf.
Exactly.
You have to understand how hard this is for me because I worked at Metro for about 10 years and all we did was try to get cities to expedite land use and permitting, reduce SDCs.
How'd that work?
I'm on the opposite side of it.
All right. So have we landed on an interim date just to hold open that we will be able to talk about at our August 11th meeting?
Yeah, I think if folks are comfortable, let's hold the 25th. And then, to Brad's point, hopefully, and Marcy and I can talk offline about this as we prep for that meeting, but maybe we could take the same tactic we've taken with city council that's been very effective, which is like, what are the key issues as opposed to kind of going through everything writ large again? Like, what are those things? And just walk through those together as a team and find our way through that.
Okay.
If we needed a facilitator that's as good as the mayor was during the work session.
I think Karen can take that mantle.
Don't compare me to Catherine.
But it was actually really well done, Karen. I'm sure you could do it. The key issues and just like going through them kind of one by one and getting a little bit of a straw vote on each one before moving on.
Okay.
It worked really well. They got through 13 out of 18 issues in about a few hours. But
I'll get some coaching.
Yeah, everyone got to be heard, and I think that is very important for sure.
Okay. All right, we'll plan that for the 11th. Yes?
Yes. And then we'll
Okay.
kind of hang on to the 25th as a just in case.
Okay.
well, hang on just a second. I think, Karen, you were saying that the 11th should be used for going through Articles 1 through 7, which we didn't really totally do. So maybe we can hold some time to do that and then try to devote half of our work session to the hot issues and resolving those and getting a support.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to get us at the end of the August 11th a thorough understanding of what's there. Point by point, what items will need to change based on council's decision so that we are all understanding where those are, and then what hot button issues we need to work on more.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think if I can focus better on the 11th, I think we'll be good. Okay.
Okay.
I didn't see any
Anything
lack of
else?
focus, but
Yeah.
Any other business? Anyone has? Okay. Well, then I'm going to just go ahead and adjourn this meeting. It's
I have one.
5:44. Oh,
You did a marvelous job in the parade, Karen, and well deserved.
it is so
And you
humbling.
look good doing it.
It's humbling having that, honor, but it's weird to be singled out when we're part of a team that has been working together on things for a very long time. It's so I'm going to nominate each one of you next time.
It's going to have to be a big convertible.
There we go.
Humility.
All right, everybody.
All right.
Let's adjourn this thing.
you.
We'll have some dinner. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Good night, John Boy.